Here we go. All right, welcome. Thank you very much for taking time out of your evening to join me. I will share my slides at the end of this presentation if you want them. I usually, as always, I have a little bit too much content for the time allotted, but we'll zoom through it, see what I did there. So we'll talk about, I'm really like kind of focusing on like the 1 hour webinar basically is kind of like an ample format for kind of discussing ways to build interaction and your slideshow. So we'll talk about developing a organized, succinct presentation, clean and readable slides. Jason, if you haven't done, a lot of presentations, I got some hot tips for you. It's important to build in opportunities to hear from your attendees, and we'll talk about delivering your presentation with confidence. So I love to start with what not to do. So what not to do is I have 3 ugly slides. A lot of government slideshows are available online, and because they're government, you can usually use them without fear of like copyright infringement. So they also are a rich source of ugly slides. So here's some ugly government slides. Later on, to be fair for the government, I do have some nice looking slides from the government. So first off, what do you think about this one? Well, welcome to unmute or pop it into the chat box.
The contrast really throws me off immediately. That's what I think of. The purple.
Yeah. You got the purple gradient background, a few different colors and font choices. Yeah.
And then like the fonts on the left, it's kind of like it's on the left side, but it's not really, I don't know what the term would be, just
it's kind of shoved in there. There's not really good balance in this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. You got the 2 little maps down here below. It's not obvious at first if they're the same or different, partly because they're really small. It's this big snake. You're not really sure where to put your eyes. There's a lot going on. You're not sure where to look. There's a lot put into one slide here. All right, 2nd out of 3 here. Kind of a similar problem. We've got some unique font colors, a lack of focus, a map here that is way too small to be useful to anybody, and who knows what they're using this slide for. Oh, and there's also this like terrible, why is it neon green emoji in the middle with the little construction Caltrans hat on? I just don't know what's going on with this. And there's just a lot to look at here. It's another good example of kind of a cluttered slide. And last but not least, we have the word wall. I should ask you both, what do you think is wrong with that? Let's say it's a word wall. There's a lot going on here, and you can see this is a leasing law regulation policy background, which sounds like they're trying to like shove it all into one side, maybe get out of the way for this particular presentation. But this is a lot to look at. A lot of words. They're probably reading this all aloud. It's just a lot. So here's some signs you're in an engaging presentation. Hopefully you don't have any of those ugly slides. Slides should be easy to read and understand, and they shouldn't distract from the speaker. So those 3 ugly slides, when you have slides that are overly cluttered without a clear focal point, a lot of font colors, a lot of things going on, they can be very distracting, especially if you're like tiny masses. People are trying to figure out like, do I need to be looking at this? Do I need to be understanding this? And it's really not clear. So they can be really distracting really quickly. And especially when it comes to cluttered slides, I say the same thing with presentation slide decks or with e-learning. You're not being charged by the slide. You can use more slides. Like usually in a 60-minute presentation, I actually have usually about 60 slides. And it's because, they don't have a lot of content. I just go through them really quickly, and then the focal point is always really clear. And hopefully they're not too distracting and they're not over loading the learner with too much information or anything. All right, so next 2 slides, I got pictures of 2 different speakers here. Of course, these are live presentations. You can't really like get cool pictures of people doing online presentations. I wish we could. So we got this guy, and then we have another guy. I don't think I can find any of women speaking. So what do you both see in these pictures that makes these presentations look like they're going well or not well?
Well, from this image, I mean, the audience is looking at him.
Yep.
I mean, the presentator also has like a some motion in his body, so
Yeah,
he's not
I like the
stiff
motion.
presenting.
Yeah, that's what drew me to
Like,
this photo.
yeah.
He's like, I'm talking about this thing. I'm using gestures to get my point across. And by the way, I hope you were both expecting to get real interactive tonight. I'm so sorry, just the two of you not making you talk to me. But hey, I can tell my presentation's working so far, right? Yeah, so this guy that you can tell, the attendees are looking at you. It's easier in a live presentation to see if people are paying attention or not. If they're looking at you, they're not looking at their phones, they're not talking to their friends. The person up front looks like they're really into it. You can tell there's some signs here that this is an engaging presentation. We'll talk about the virtual version of that too. The presenter has high energy, speaks clearly. I've been told I talk fast, but generally I enunciate, so it's okay. And of course, a good sign is that the attendees are paying attention. I mean, the minute someone, especially adults, feel like a presentation is not worth their time, they're going to stop paying attention. They're going to start multitasking. They're going to start doing something else, or they're just going to leave. So, pretty clear signs right there. I got some. This is a funny slide. So the corollary for teaching online, if you're doing a Zoom, is that you have cameras turned on. Both of your cameras turned on. I very much appreciate that. If you want to turn them off and like multitask, whatever, that's totally fine. Not going to hurt my feelings. This is a particular presentation I did, which I just thought was really funny because you can see me up here in the top right corner, the selfie or whatever, and I have like, I don't know, one of the attendees here. And it was really disconcerting because she never moved, and it actually turned out, a little bit closer there, that's actually her Zoom profile picture. So when she turns her camera off, she's like, and I'm like, we're gonna learn something from this woman. But it's really, it's kind of disconcerting too when you're doing a Zoom presentation, someone's like really leaning in. So this was not a good sign that I was doing an engaging presentation. So obviously her camera is off and she just had a very clever profile picture. But other ways to tell if a Zoom presentation is engaging, of course, if people are talking to you, whether it's unmuting their microphones, or if you have a really big group and that's a little unmanageable, they're popping things into the chat. So signs you're in an engaging virtual presentation, they're paying attention, and they are because they're participating. So really in a virtual presentation, the only way you know that it's working really well is if you have things that are interactive and the attendees are engaging with you. They're participating, they're asking questions. Either of you have any other signs you can think of that indicate you're in a successful online presentation? It's okay if you don't. Similar things. Hopefully the speaker is easy to hear, speakers speaking clearly, same slide deck principles, obviously. Drawing attention to where the eye needs to go. I'd also say they're pausing more often probably than a live presentation. One of the challenges I feel as a live and online presenter is that I feel like it's really more important to build in structured pauses into an online presentation. So there are more opportunities for the learner kind of sit back and absorb, think if they have any questions, because it has to be more intentional to like actually hit like unmute or chat or whatever. Whereas if you're in a live presentation, there's some body language going on where someone's kind of like leaning or making a face. You can be like, hey, you, like, do you have a question? And you don't get that in an online presentation. So you have to be more intentional in building in opportunities for engagement and hopefully building a little bit more comfort with engagement, which is where like, icebreakers and other kind of cheesy things can come into play. But the more comfortable your attendees are, unmuting, jumping into chat, the more likely it is to be a successful presentation for them as well. Okay. So let's move on to talk about design. So I kind of roughly structure this presentation as like a design, develop, implement, kind of like a mini Addy sort of situation, since you're both instructional designers. It's a refresher for you on cognitive load. Cognitive load is an important topic to remember, a concept to remember. It's the total amount of mental activity imposed on your working memory in any given moment. So if you'll recall how the brain works, I can't actually remember if we covered this in our class or not. I love to talk about it. Anything you're thinking about any given moment is in your short-term or working memory, and that information has to be transferred to your long-term memory for it to be actually sticking around long-term. But the problem is that your short-term or working memory can only handle like a few things at a time. Things are kind of fleeting. It's like that situation where you're trying to, remember why you walked into a room, right? And you're like, why did I come in here? I know there's a reason I came in here. Sometimes you walk back to the other room to remember what that was. But that's because you're thinking of something you need to do. It's only in a short-term working memory. You walked in the room and poof, it was already gone. You didn't transfer it to your long-term memory. And why would you? Like, you don't need to remember forever why you walked into a certain room. But it's important in any sort of learning experience, including a presentation live or in person or online. You need to think about how much you're taxing your learner's working memory at any given time. Because always the goal is to kind of like, get them to learn something and keep it long term. So keep in mind that you need to not overwhelm people when they're coming into your presentation. Ways you can do that, very concrete strategies for avoiding overwhelming your learners include removing any sort of extraneous detail. I find that there tends to be a lot of like expert bias, especially with new instructional designers or new presenters, where they want to like throw everything, whether it's all into one slide or all into one presentation. They go into a lot of tangents, things like that. There's a lot of extraneous detail that, beginners to a topic or people that are just coming to learn something kind of casually, they don't need to know. So keep in mind what's really important and what's not so important. And of course, if you follow more effective visual design principles, then your learners and your attendees are going to have an easier time following along because there's not going to be so much overwhelm for them. Here's a great example. If you would like to take a time travel trip with me back to the early days of Yahoo, this is what the homepage looked like. I mean, if you want to like search, the search is pretty clear, but I mean, there used to be a lot of other resources that search engines offered that you'd have to like click through, and people like were really into like, using these things, but you had to really know where the thing was that you wanted to use and like use it all the time, because you get here and you just kind of like, someone told me I should go to the job ads on here. I don't know where that is. Of course, Yahoo has since redesigned to be much cleaner. And of course, every time I think about Yahoo, I'm amazed it still exists. Here it is. It looks clean, tidy. I think it's still a lot. I don't really know why Yahoo exists, but hey, at least their homepage is a little bit tidier. And of course, that's in beautiful contrast to Google, which is renowned for its very simple search page. If you want something, you just type in the words and hopefully it comes up. If it doesn't come up and you're like, well, I give up. If it's on the first page of results, it might as well not exist, right? But it's a very good example of reducing cognitive load. Google does have a ton of resources. Google Drive, Google Docs. Oh God, every time I see the full list of all the things that Google has, I'm always kind of on YouTube, of course. But they don't bother listing all of these things out unless you're like really determined to find that list. You just do a quick search, and that's how they're reducing cognitive load. And they're more likely to bring people to their page back again and again. That's why Google's now a verb, because they're very good at reducing that cognitive load and making it a very pleasant experience. Of course, besides all how they're really good at like knowing what you're thinking before you even tell them about it. So some strategies for reducing cognitive load as preparing any sort of presentation or live learning experience. I love PowerPoint. I use it for everything. I think it works as a reason. It's used for everything all the time. But close PowerPoint, open Word, something similar, even like a Sketchpad or something. Open whatever your proposal, I should say, it's like, maybe it's a bad word, maybe more your summary of your presentation, and just outline it in advance. Take like, a piece of paper and outline it in advance. That's the best way to make sure you're sticking to only what's important, is by having a really good idea of what you actually need to accomplish and then outlining. And as instructional designers, you might have some learning objectives. I'd say like 3 or 4 is probably great for an hour-long presentation, scale up as needed, and then be really clear about how the content you're including is going to align to those learning objectives. And then, and only then, once that's really planned out, what kind of content you want to include, then open up PowerPoint and start mapping stuff out. As with all kind of design projects, it'll save you some time too as you are developing your PowerPoint, because you'll be able to keep track of what you've already included and not included, because you already had it mapped out, and you won't have so much redundant content. It will be less of a mess if you're trying to figure out how to organize your PowerPoint if you already do an outline in advance. It's easier to see things in Word than it is in PowerPoint once you've like kind of put it all together. That's what I find anyways. And of course, think about your attendees. What do they want from this presentation? What do you think is bringing them in? Are they required to be there? where do you think they are at? Of course, this is like, the analysis phase of ADDIE for instructional designers. Who are they? How did they learn best? Think about what's going to work really well for them. Of course, you should be focusing on whatever the problem is. There's a reason that you're giving this presentation. Usually it's addressing some sort of problem, or some sort of very specific topic, if you want to look at it that way. Focus on what the thing is that you're trying to get across through your presentation, and really limit that impulse to add everything, as well as the kitchen sink. Again, there's some expert bias that comes across that, people are like, you need to know this and this and this, and also, oh, just in case, you need to know about this thing. I mean, if there's other stuff you want to include, put it on a handout and then give them a handout. That's a nice thing to do. Or you can also put it in the notes of your PowerPoint and then give your attendees your PowerPoint. I always recommend adding personality and interactivity. Learning online can be very alienating. I'd say it's not really a natural human space to be virtual. So any way you can humanize your presentation is great. One way I'm humanizing this presentation is by keeping my camera on and by being fairly casual. It's okay to add some humor if you want to go the cheesy route. A lot of time people don't expect any sort of like humor in a presentation. So anything you can add, people generally appreciate it if it's super cheesy. And of course, the more you engage with your attendees, the more you're adding personality and you're humanizing your presentation, making it a friendlier space for people to feel comfortable engaging with you. So this slide's more intended for when I did this for like a really big group, but I thought it was funny. I made this very, very clever book cover in case you're not seeing the contrasting font there. It says, "Are you there, attendee? It's me, presenter." And I asked them all to type hello if they were not multitasking, because last time I did this, like everyone had their camera off. I got a whole bunch of hellos. That made me feel good. So it's a big struggle when you're working virtually and you're presenting virtually, especially in Zoom, because again, those cameras are off. You hope you sound okay. You hope everyone's still there. You hope the Zoom's full screen and they're not doing something else, but everyone's doing something else. So the more you can bring them back, the better they're going to retain what they're learning, and the better they're going to feel about having experienced this presentation along with you. So as I just mentioned, it's isolating. The presenter too is often disembodied. You log into a Zoom late, there's just someone like already mid-sentence talking, and you're like, oh, where am I in this presentation? You can't like lean over to the person next to you and be like, hey, like, did I miss something? Because it just gets really awkward really fast. And yeah, as I just mentioned, attendees tend to keep their cameras off as well. All right. So one concrete rule I really like to follow, especially for virtual presentations, is the 10 and 2 rule. It's all about chunking your content. The idea is you chunk your content, you have a really solid outline before you develop that PowerPoint, you chunk your content, and you spend no more than 10 minutes presenting and 2 minutes interacting. So the idea is that you are very consciously building out chunks of content, and you're building in opportunities for not only interacting, but a small space for your attendees to take a moment, work through whatever's in their working memory, and process that into long term. If no one ever gets a break from hearing you talk, I know I'm talking a lot right now, none of that's going to transfer from the short term to their long term. And of course, encourage questions. So I can't remember where my next break slide is. Let me just pause right here. Either of you have any questions, comments? Need a quiet moment. Here it is.
Well, it just reminds me of our other design, and just all those like YouTube videos and micro learning lessons. They all tell you, 5 to 6 minutes is as long as someone usually can pay attention to.
Yeah.
And then adding like a knowledge check or some type of interaction to engage them a little more and go on. Like before I started the program, I watched one of your videos about this kind of chunking rule, and I thought that was a great idea, because it is hard, especially nowadays with people's kind of attention or lack of attention, that even 10 minutes sometimes seems like a long time.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Depending on the subject matter, I can see how that's important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's, different considerations for different formats, especially if you're doing video. Like, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm not going to watch this. I'm going to watch it fast. I'm going to jump to what I need. If you're live, it's a little bit, I feel like you're a little bit more likely to get a little bit more attention because there are opportunities for interacting, asking questions, engaging. Like no one watches recorded webinars. Like I've done recorded webinars, and I personally them out to people sometimes, and if they have a question that I've covered before. But like like you don't like wake up one morning and say, you know what, I want to watch some recorded webinars. If you have a scheduled webinar, like both of you are here, that's awesome. You're here. There's a reason that you made the time to come to this. You know, you could have just emailed me and said, hey, are you gonna record this and post it somewhere? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, here you go. If you're anything like me, that's gonna go into your like, yeah, I'm gonna do this eventually folder. And you may or may not do it, because I know this because I signed up for one recently. I didn't attend, they sent me the recording. I'm like, I'm totally gonna watch this. And this is like 3 weeks later, it's still sitting in my inbox. It's terrible. So yeah, videos, especially very short, live. I mean, it's you have this time you're carving out to be together, but you still got to chunk that content and make space for people to engage. So here's some concrete ideas on activities you can do to engage. I've got 4 specific ideas for you. The first is polls. They can be a little more formal. You can get some really nice visualizations going if you use something like Poll Everywhere or Mentimeter. They both have a free version. I like Mentimeter better. It makes prettier things. But what's neat, Poll Everywhere I know you can do by text. I think you can by, well, everyone's got a smartphone now anyways, so it doesn't matter so much. But they both allow audiences to participate by smartphone. So even that if they're online, like they don't have to open up another browser window or anything, they can just use their smartphone and participate, so that's fun. And that, of course, you have to set up in advance, and that can leave itself to technology snafus on the day of your presentation. But a Zoom or any similar webinar software is going to have a chat box. You can ask simple yes/no questions, short answer questions, things for people that are probably too shy or hesitant to unmute their own microphone for whatever reason. People are likely to more likely to put things into the chat box. And you can also get really familiar with Zoom and figure out the different like raise hand or reactions in Zoom and get people engaging with you that way. It could be like, you have your all your pictures of your attendees up and say, raise your hand if you've ever done this. You can see little hands come up, things like that. Just something to get someone touching their computer rather than just like leaning back or, if they're off doing something else. All right, so second idea, go ahead, Jason.
I'm just gonna have a quick question. Like our university, we just started pushing out Poll Everywhere to all our labs and classrooms and stuff. We had like a demand for it. Does Fullerton have something similar?
Fullerton now has given us Mentimeter. I didn't want to mention it because I'm not sure if it's just faculty or not, but they've given us at least faculty full access to a pro subscription of Mentimeter. So I was using the free version, so my free account just kind of got rolled into the pro one.
Is that something like you see like faculty nowadays trying to do is utilizing some of those polls a little bit more into their classes?
I don't have a lot of engagement with other faculty. I've always liked to use polls. I've always used Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter. I mean, it's similar to like, I don't know if faculty are still doing clickers. Jason, you might know better than me.
Yeah, I just learned about that recently. Like they have these polls and the students have to buy these clicker devices for the poll. So I can't believe the students had to buy like and they had to do that. And I was dumbfounded.
If everyone's got a smartphone, there's no reason to be doing the clickers anymore. Yeah, I feel like clickers were like a 10, 15 years ago thing. Now that everyone has a smartphone, or at least a computer, I feel like, most everyone's got enough technology. I don't know. Anyways, we can get into like, how much technology students actually have. If you have one person that doesn't have a smartphone, is it fair? Anyways, this would replace clickers. I'm astounded people are still using clickers. I would hope that more faculty are building an engagement, especially into large lectures, especially in online formats. But I mean, I would say most people at a minimum are probably at least using the chat box a lot. It's really easy to just put a question up on screen and have people put in the chat box and get some responses to that.
Yeah, just kind of more curious from your faculty, or if you see research or anything about that, especially with the hybrid models now, and that they're really pushing that at the school level, right? So they really want to build out the in-person and virtual classes running at the same time. So I'm gonna imagine like Poll Everywhere, software based. I mean, people from home and people in the class can still be in the same poll, right? Because you don't have a physical clicker and things like that. So.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the physical clicker. Yeah, if you're doing like a hybrid where you have some people in person, some people online, yeah, it makes sense to do something full everywhere Mentimeter. I mean, it depends on how much faculty range so widely in their determination to teach effectively and to teach with new technology in a way that works really well for them. I mean, I have a bias because I'm in an instructional design program, and all the other faculty are, instructional design faculty, and like we're all interested in technology and doing these things. I mean, as a whole, yeah, I've seen definitely an increase in using that kind of technology because everyone's been forced to teach online for the last few years, whether they're going back in person or not. So yeah, there's a trend to using more of these things. Oh, and Mentimeter too, you can also use it asynchronously. I've used it in classes too. So even if you're in an asynchronous class or whatever it is, learning experience, you can post that and people can still see the results for it too. So yeah, you have a lot more options, a lot more flexible.
Does that integrate into Canvas as well, or is that totally?
It's not like a straight like integration. I think I did like it was like an iframe. They have an embed code, so you can just embed it in your screen, and then the attendee, I can't remember how I set up exactly. I think there's like a link. I could say you could go click on this link, or you can just view this and then put the code manually, because Mentimeter just has a code at the top. They just go to Mentimeter and type it in.
Okay, just again more curiosity because we're transitioning to Canvas ourselves from.
I love Canvas. Canvas is great.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel. I know I don't want to shake on the conversation. This is all just IT.
No, you're fine. It's interesting, super interesting.
Alrighty, so jumping back in here. So polls are great because you can do them on the fly, you can set them up in advance. I mean, like no matter how much effort you want to put in, you can put in very little effort, a little bit more effort, and get really good results and know that your attendees are with you. Oh, and also with polls, if you need any sort of like evidence of your teaching or a record of your presentation, like that information is stored. Responses are stored and full everywhere in Mentimeter. So you can always like print that out later on and be like, these are the responses I got last time. And that could also be used to improve your teaching going forward as well. So that's a nice option. Of course, you can always run discussions in person or in an online presentation. It can be a little more awkward, of course, in online presentation. But if you get familiar with Zoom in advance and you get some practice, you're feeling really brave, you can use breakout rooms. Zoom makes it pretty easy to use breakout rooms. The first time I used them, I think I watched a couple of YouTube videos and, kind of made sure I knew where everything was and everything was turned on, because sometimes Zoom has some features turned off. So always test things in advance, of course. That's a nice way to get people into smaller groups, which can feel less overwhelming. You can also have a discussion as one big group, and you can turn on annotation in Zoom, and people can actually just dive in themselves to add comments, or you as the presenter can be adding those comments on screen. And that'll be directly on the Zoom screen. If you're recording, it'll be part of the video recording. If you are just putting them on screen, otherwise not recording, you don't get a record of those, but it's a nice way, kind of like you're using a whiteboard. To kind of organize comments as you're running a discussion. A longtime favorite of mine is Padlet. It's like an online corkboard. You can use it for brainstorming. You can ask attendees to contribute like a resource or an idea, or what's called like an exit ticket. Like before you leave this room, like you need to put something on the board. What's nice about it is it's really user-friendly. You have to set it up in advance, and you have to provide the link to the Padlet. And then your learners, your attendees, can just pull it up on their device or their computer, and they can just double-click anywhere on the web page itself and add information that everybody can see. So you also have to think about who your attendees are. Like there's always, I don't know, when I was teaching with some like undergraduate college freshmen, there's always someone that puts something silly on there, and you have to have moderation in place. So think about who your attendees are, and that's the thing that they want to do. That's a nice way, again, for attendees that don't necessarily want to speak up or talk to people. You can have them put something onto the online Padlet, and you can pull that up in front of the whole class as well. I should have brought an example here. And you can, share that with the group as you are contributing things to it. Lastly, one of my all-time favorites is Kahoot. It's just you've both been my students. I've probably done Kahoot with you at some point. I just love Kahoot. It's just a short game show style multiple choice quiz that you all do together and becomes competitive. The faster you answer a question as an attendee, the more points you get. People are very excited about earning points and ending up at the top of the podium at the end. So I've used this in person, I've used this online. It works great for either. It's a little bit less exciting online because usually it's a little bit more fiddly to get the music to play because there's exciting music that goes along with it. But it still works really well in the format.
Would that style count as like gamification? Because people want to get points and that gets them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what do you have? What are the two features of gamification? So limited time, and you have points attached to it, and competition with your peers. So yeah, these things are surprisingly motivating for a very wide range of audiences. I mostly only teach adults, and adults love it, kids love it, everyone loves it. Yeah, it's definitely a form of gamification that takes a multiple choice quiz. And you're just checking for understanding or doing a poll with the quiz, whatever it is that you're doing. That also collects the answers as well for the future if you need to keep that information. Yeah, everyone loves it, and it is a really easy form of gamification. All right, so those are my 4 activities, but whatever you are planning out, always leave time at the end. I'm looking at my watch because I tend to forget to leave time at the end, or I have too much content and not enough time. Try to plan for leaving time at the end. That'll also help you in case of any like technology snafus, whether you're in person or online. And it leaves time for engagement. And generally, like, I don't generally need 15 minutes in my presentation, but if I'm building an opportunities for engagement and interactivity as I go through the presentation, that takes up time, and then I'll push my whatever my presentation time is towards the end of my slot. So you always have to kind of build in those opportunities, and the more opportunities you have throughout your presentation for asking questions, the less time really you probably need at the end, because people are getting those questions out as they have them. All right. So here's my major takeaways for designing. Notice I haven't even talked about like really developing a presentation yet. Always recommend outlining first, stick to the point, have a focus, take out the extraneous stuff, humanize it where possible, keep the 10 and 2 rule in mind, and of course, plan for time at the end. So any thoughts at this moment? No? Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, I have too many slides, not enough time. So let's move on to developing. So as I mentioned, government PowerPoints are available and plentiful on the internet. And I pulled 3 ugly slides. Now, in all fairness, I've got 3 okay slides from the government. I wouldn't say these are brilliant, they're fine. So I'll show you these 3 really fast, and we'll just quickly kind of take a look and talk about what you think works or doesn't work. So what do you 2 think about this one? Is this an okay slide?
It gets to the point. There's not too much text. I mean, the color choice is kind of boring. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure what the big orange line is about, unless it's trying to just separate the content. But yeah, it's not overly distracting or anything.
Right. Yeah, I think this is like a PowerPoint template. So I suspect that this heading's on every single slide, and then it's got the bar, and then it's got the number. It's probably the slide number, and then they have the actual content below. So yeah, it's an okay slide. It's fine. It gets to the point. It has a focal point. There's a very specific bit of information. There's a photo, and there's like a slightly smaller caption for the photo. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, beige on beige, not my preference, but it's fine. It works. All right, what do you think about this one? Fine.
To the point.
To the point. It's clean. It's well balanced. It's got color at the top and bottom. Again, it's clearly a template they're using. It's got 4 bullet points. The critical information is bolded, so it's really clear. Maybe kind of differentiate that number. It's pretty easy to read. I don't see a lot of extraneous word choice. It's very to the point. Last but not least, I don't know what the National Geodetic Survey is. What do you think about this slide? Does it work? Not work? I mean, I don't know what it is, this information is, but it seems to work. What do you think, Jason?
I just I'm not sure, like, if their colors are like coordinated to something, like
I didn't thought about that. That's
right.
important.
So that's like, okay, is the red supposed to be like bad or good?
The yellow warning. Yeah, and the yellow probably isn't enough contrast with the white background either as far as accessibility too. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, that's a really good point. That color really has meaning. People might be like, are jackhammers bad? Is by hand good or less bad? As far as
First thing I
layout
see
goes,
is the chart and then the colors, and I'm like, okay, what do the colors
what do
signify?
the colors mean,
Why
right?
do they add it? You know, because they're
Right.
so prominent.
Yeah, well, at least the bars are differentiated maybe. It's cleanly laid out. There's a good amount of white space. Yeah, now I'm wondering what the colors mean too, but at least it's a clean slide. All right, so I talked a little about slide design earlier. To reiterate, avoid walls of text, use bullet points and simple visuals. Be consistent no matter what you choose. Basically, if you have consistency in your slide design from slide to slide, it's going to reduce cognitive load because users are, they're expecting to see a heading or whatever at the top, expecting to see bullet points, whatever your format is. Just like with e-learning, same with PowerPoints, just be consistent. And above all, keep it simple. As a reminder, if your slide looks like this, you're doing it wrong. This is probably a little too simple, but the idea is there. It's good to have white space. Oh, so quick backtrack to Yahoo here. There's not a lot of white space. There's not any room for anything here to breathe. The Google slide, plenty of white space, plenty of room for things to breathe. Good balance. It's very centered. So keep that in mind. Balance out your slide elements. There should always be some sort of focal point, or at least some direction the eye is going. If you're not sure how the eye is going to travel across your slide, maybe take something out, break into multiple slides. Let your elements breathe as well. Oh, I can't remember if I shared my volume here. I have a funny thing I want to share with you. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare really fast so I can share my sound. Here we go. Okay. So I think the next slide is funny. Hopefully you do too. Again, this is from a government slide. It's an example of animation with sound effects used gratuitously. Let's see. Come on, play. Oh, come on, man. There we go. Thank you for laughing. Yeah, it's just kind of a silly thing. Yeah, this is an example of gratuitous sound effects and basically animations. So use like a gunshot at the beginning. There's this like clicking sound as everything comes in. Then it's like a I don't know, 80s video game sound like doo 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 as the things come down. Basically, the point of me showing you this is that animations and sound effects should really have a point. I am amused by this. Generally, they should not have a sound unless you're trying to make some sort of point with that sound. And when it comes down to it, if you are not sure, don't do it. Just fade in and out. No one feeding in and out is not going to, embarrass you or make someone go, why are they doing that? But if you have like things bouncing across the screen, it can get real distracting. That's another example of adding cognitive load. If there's strange animations that are unexpected or over the top, or if there's weird sound effects, that's going to add to cognitive load. All right, so my next couple slides, I think, are just kind of some quick concrete tips on building out and developing your presentations. Always check the quality of your images. Crop to what's important. If you have like a really, really big picture, make it smaller and just show what's important. Jason, did you have something?
Yeah, you're just not in presentation mode if you care.
Wait, what?
Well, we see your note slide and everything.
You do? Oh, I have two screens. This is the perils of having two screens. All right, better?
Yeah,
okay.
Less distracting, less cognitive load. I don't have to see two windows.
Thank you, Mike. What do you mean? I shared my, anyways. Yeah, thank you. That's important. That is distracting. And at least I don't really have a lot of notes. I kind of just like go off the cuff. But anyways, yeah. You don't want to see what's coming up before I brought it up on screen.
You were just testing us, right?
I was, thank you. Exactly. And you're like, no, this is extraneous details. You're adding my cognitive load, Lindsay. This is not okay. All right. Okay, if you have a really presentation or a really photo heavy presentation, I always recommend using a black background just because the white can like really hurt your eyeballs around photos. I've learned that the hard way when I've had like really photo heavy things. Or, you know, if you just have one slide that has like a really nice photo on it and you really want that photo to pop by itself, put a black background on it. Fonts.
You mean the whole background or like the frame of it?
Oh, the whole background. Yeah, just like something about like, I'm sure if we had like an artist or like someone's actually like a graphic designer here that could probably explain to us what the issue is. I've just found that having like a white background like I have here, if I put a photo in the middle, it just like the contrast between the white and the photo just takes away from the photo. So if you really have like, I wish I should have made an example. If you have a really nice photo, you want the photo just kind of breathe and have, you know, be the center of attention, and having a white background kind of just hurts the eyeballs when it's just too much of a contrast. If you have a nice black background or if it's a really dark muted background, it's going to let that photo be the center of attention without having a contrast that kind of hurts your eyes.
Is that something you would take into consideration if there's text as well on the slide, or if it's a photo only kind of slide?
If it's a photo only kind of situation. I mean, if you have text too, I mean, it depends on how much text you have. You could put it on there and make it white text or have it like be like a white box of text or something in it. You know, just kind of like a, you know, if you look at it for too long, if it hurts your eyes, it's maybe a little bit, you know, too much contrast. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at a very white slide and it's hurting my eyes right now, so I don't know. All right, so fonts. More than 2 fonts will also kind of tend to add to cognitive load. I say generally keep it to 2 fonts. It also keeps a cleaner visual design. Avoid overused novelty fonts. Comic Sans, like, come on, people are still using this. I don't know why. There's some really wonderful online resources for getting font pairing suggestions. Fontpair.co is great. It actually gives you font pairing suggestions, and they're all open source fonts, so you can just download them right away and start using them right away, which is really nice. And in PowerPoint, just like with you know, Captivate or Storyline, you know, use the built-in layouts, use built-in templates, make a template that works and keep on using it. There's also really useful features both in PowerPoint and in those authoring software. You can do alignment, and there's also master slides as well. So let me show you how alignment works. And now I am purposefully going to share my PowerPoint editing, what am I trying to say? Canvas mode, whatever. I'm close. Here we go. All right. So here's how alignment works. And again, this is a feature available in Captivate and Storyline as well. So I got these boxes and they're kind of all over the place. Kind of just put them where you want the outer 2 to go. So you want the outer 2 to be kind of like that.
Are you supposed to be
We
sharing?
can't see.
Oh my God. All right. You see now?
Yes.
It's, you know, it's the last presentation of the summer. It just gets worse from here. All right, so say you have these boxes, I want them all to be in line. Put the outer 2 kind of where you want them to go. Select all of them, and then let's see, there it is. Okay. Under shape format, you can go to align, and you can go align middle, and it instantly lines them all up really nice and tidy. All that is bugging me now is that they have different amounts of space between them. And here you can go distribute horizontally, and then poof, they're perfect. This is a minor thing, but it really like bugs me when, like, you know, this is slightly up there, this is like slightly over. And you look at someone's slide and like, you're like, something's bothering me about this. I don't know exactly what's bothering me about this, but something's bothering me. And that adds to cognitive load too. So use this feature. It's amazing. I love it. Also in PowerPoint, there are master slides. So you can go to, and this is where I go, how do you find it? Under view, you go to slide master, and you can edit these master slides. You can make different default fonts. You can create different versions. Say maybe you have a version of like a bulleted slide that animates and a version that doesn't, for instance, things like that. If you put a object onto a master slide, it'll appear on all of the slides that use that same master slide template. Again, this is another feature. It's available in Captivate and Storyline if you haven't used it. It's a great way to make a design choice for your entire presentation without having to go and like edit every single slide in your presentation. So I won't belabor that. I'm gonna stop share and restart the slideshow. And of course, I lost my Zoom window. Zoom, where are you? There it is. Okay, I'm sharing the correct screen this time. Okay, so yeah, you can create your own layouts in the slide master. You can change overall fonts, you can change overall colors, you can add logos. Again, it's a great way to make one change that affects your entire presentation. Getting to my last of my tips here. Attendees love downloads. If you have a slide deck or a handout, depending if you're on Mac or Windows Zoom, they behave a little bit differently. You can actually drag and drop them to the Zoom chat box sometimes, or you can just share like a Dropbox link or something. Always recommend making sure your name and contact is on whatever download you're offering, so people to know where it came from. If you want to put a Creative Commons license on it, you can make sure they give you credit appropriately. But they always know who to contact if they have questions, or keep your name in mind. And you can always offer more resources if you have them on your webpage or blog or portfolio or whatever. And of course, remember, check in with your attendees. Make sure that's a thing that you are always doing. So development takeaways here. Be consistent in your design, kind of what to expect. If you're choosing to use a technology like Poll Everywhere or Mentimeter, keep in mind it's going to take people perhaps a little bit more time to log in, figure out how to use it. So don't use too many technologies in a presentation. Think about the time you have and how much like setup time you're going to need for a technology. So if you're doing like a 1 hour presentation, for example, like I wouldn't use more than like 1 or 2 technologies. I might have like a Mentimeter at the very beginning to do a poll, and I might do a Kahoot, but that would be really pushing it for a 1 hour presentation, because there is a little bit of like setup time where you have to give people a little extra time to get in there and add their own thoughts or participate. So keep it simple, because then we'll keep it simple. Balance out your slide designs, use master slides and the alignment tool. It's going to make everything really clean and consistent. And remember, interact. So let me pause for just a second here. I still have a few more slides that are running low on time. Any comments about this? Any of these tips surprise you? Anything you'd add?
I just had the question about the technology. I know you said leave time at the end, like 60 minutes, leave 15.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the little technology snafus, do you build that into the 10 and 2 minute kind of thing? Like for that 2 minutes, do you build in like technology issues, or is that more like the 15-minute part of it? Does that make sense? Do you build it into it?
You need to build in a little extra time. Like if you're doing like a Kahoot, I only ever do like a 10 question Kahoot, but I find the Kahoot can easily suck up 15 minutes just for a 10 question Kahoot, because it takes like 5 minutes to set up. Then, you're maybe talking people through the answers as you go through it. You'll get more of a feel the more presenting you do of how much like time a technology is really going to take in the course of a presentation, to be able to kind of like plan that out accordingly.
So it sounds like you more build it in, right? So the 15-minute at the end is just really kind of like your
more for questions,
backup leftover time or chat time or questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you can see, we're past that now, and I did not take my own advice to build that in.
Well, we've been using it, and we've been chunking it and using it throughout the course. That's
right. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for the validation. Yeah, technology always takes a little bit extra time, and someone's always going to have an issue or be confused about it, and this is a know your audience kind of thing as well. If you know your audience already, like if the people you're taught before, you kind of know where they are with technology, you can engage better. If it's someone brand new, or it's like a really diverse audience, you're not going to know what technology they're bringing. It could be more of an issue. All right, I believe this is my last section. When it comes to delivery, I'm going to kind of move through this kind of briefly here. Rehearse as much as you can, especially if it's a presentation you haven't done before, if you're feeling really nervous about it. Practice it. You can track your timing. You can run through the presentation on your own, make notes at kind of like critical points in the presentation, how long it took you to get there. You can record yourself in your presentation, see if it's coming across the way you expected it to, if the visuals are coming across, if the sound's coming across. You can practice using Zoom. You can record using Zoom. And always recommend, make copious notes on how to set up your presentation in advance. So if there's like technology you're using, you need to log in, like Kahoot makes you log in. If you're going to be in like a strange room you haven't used before because you're doing this in person, you need to write down your login information. So when you get to that room, you can just log in advance, things like that. Make notes on critical information for yourself so just so your presentation flows really seamlessly. You don't want to stop in the middle of your presentation to log into Kahoot. Then you have to find the Kahoot, and it's like a whole thing. That just really slows you down. Don't read your slides. I just read my slide. Never recommend that. You can tell when someone's reading a script, period. Some people use scripts because I think it makes them less nervous and they feel like they're going to cover everything. But then it's kind of like, well, I could just watch this as a video, or, this could have been an email. It's not very humanizing if someone's like droning on. Practice confidence. If you don't feel confidence, it's okay to be excited and talk a little fast sometimes. It does humanize a presentation. A lot of people worry about stumbling over their words, using filler words like or ah. It humanizes a presentation. It actually leads to being a more engaging presentation. I say this as I'm, self-validating here. But like if someone's using a script that's like they're trying to be perfect, and like no one likes people that are perfect, right? You can tell they're trying to be anyways. People like people that are, human people. You can always print your slide notes in advance, grab a pen. I always have something to write with, like even now I've done this presentation before, I've got something to write with here so I can take notes. So if I have any issues, I can make a note so I can fix them for next time. You can number slides or just keep track in your PowerPoint of where you are, or maybe keep sometimes I do an outline of like, all right, slide 34 is like halfway through, or I need to be at slide 34 by the time 10 minutes have passed, or whatever. Just get an idea of how long your presentation is. You can pace it a little bit better. Get a beverage, always have a beverage. It's also a good opportunity for someone that talks fast like me to be like, hold on, I'm going to stop talking for a minute. And then everyone gets a break for listening to me for at least the sound of that sip, the length of that slip. Anyways, setting up, if it's possible, if you're doing an online presentation and you can do a backup computer or phone, I will do that if it's a high stakes presentation. I actually use my phone as a hotspot too, because like we've had issues with our internet here. If you can do backups, that's great. If you can't, do the best you can. I'm not using a headset currently because I'm feeling a little more casual tonight, but if I am doing a higher stakes presentation, a headset will give you better sound for your attendees. And of course, always test your audio and microphone in advance. Even if you're doing a Zoom presentation, wear pants. You never know if you're gonna have to, this is not from experience. I'm being very serious. Like I've always worn pants in my presentations, just so you know. But I always have found that like I end up having to get up or something, or you feel more professional and ready to present if you're fully clothed in work clothes and you're fully groomed as well. Like I go brush my teeth even though no one can smell my breath, things like that. As you're presenting, I always recommend keeping your camera on. If you are in a presentation where you have like 500 attendees, that's going to kill your bandwidth and you might not be able to do that. So if you find that your presentation is stuttering, and I've had a few for MSIDT that like I freeze a lot. If I'm freezing a lot as a presenter, usually if I turn off my camera, that solves the issue. So keep that in mind, technology willing. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just question, because I've seen that kind of both ways, because that's usually like why I have my camera off a lot of the time, because I'm trying to be respectful of other people's bandwidth. And but from the presenter's point of view, sometimes I've seen it where like, okay, I'm gonna turn off my camera so it's not distracting, so people can focus on the presentation versus the mini picture of you talking. So like, how do you kind of determine the context, or really when's the right time I should have like a little side video of me versus just not doing that?
Oh man, I don't know if I have an answer for that. It's kind of a personal preference thing. I always keep my camera on if I can, because I feel like when you're online, your voice is really disembodied. So if you can like see who that voice is coming from, it helps ground you a little bit and brings you more into a presentation. It's probably a personal preference thing. I'd be interested if there's research on that. I know technically it does add to cognitive load to have your head as the presenter floating and then also have stuff on screen. If this were a really complex presentation where like, say I was giving a lecture on chemistry, I know nothing about chemistry. If I had a really complex slide, I would probably turn off my camera so that people could really focus on what was on screen. If you're delivering anything that's really complex, that's really important, that people need more time to kind of process, probably turn off your camera. For kind of like a light and breezy presentation like this, it feels more natural to leave my camera on and like talk to you. And it also kind of helps remind me too that like, I want to like look at the camera and, talk to both of you that are here, because this is a little bit more casual. We're discussing presentation. So yeah, so if it's really complex, probably turn it off. If you're feeling light and breezy, like, keep it on. Maybe get a
I
feel.
just, yeah,
You can
because it
include
brings to
the,
mind some of like, you know, our group presentations for our cohort, right? So we had ones where some teams had their cameras on, some had it
Sure.
off, and for the most part, I felt more engaged like when it was on, because even though you hear the voice, you kind of still see them and the material at the same time, and it's pre-recorded, so you could pause it if you wanted to, but just because you're presenting this, I was just kind of curious if there's like kind of like a, you know, standard or default on the
it's
suggestion.
not. A lot of people turn it off because of bandwidth issues. I feel like that's getting less of a problem. Yeah, but that'd be a good survey. Like, did you like me having my camera on? You make that one anonymous. Like, no, I hated seeing your face. But I mean, that's a survey you could do. I'd be interested to see if there is research on that. So I'll take a look, and next time I feel bored, I'll look at that research. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's more of a personal preference. Oh, I always recommend sharing your whole screen, just because if you're sharing just like a software window, inevitably you'll need to go out of that software window and like stop sharing and resharing, as I already goofed up tonight and demonstrated. Always keep an eye on the chat. Be comfortable with silence, whether you're in person or online. We are basically at time, so I'm going to zoom through pretty quickly here. I always recommend doing a personal debrief after you do a presentation, even if you have no plans to do that presentation again. Any reflection you do is going to help you become a better presenter in the future. So take notes as you go through, and afterwards, you know, take 10 minutes after your presentation to be like, what went well, what could have gone better, how's your timing, and you're making notes here for future use. So what I'll do is I'll make a Word document, and I'll put all my notes into a Word document in the same file as the slide deck. So next time, if I want to come back and like reuse it or gut it for something else, I'll have some notes I can go back and reflect and go, oh, okay, I could have done this better. And that helps me do better in the future. All right, so some quick takeaways here. Organized, succinct, good things to aim for. Go for clean and readable. Strategize. You have to build in engagement with attendees, whether you're doing in person or online, because if you don't build it in, you might forget all about it. Pretend you're really confident, deliver with confidence, fake it till you make it if you're not confident. Good resources, fontpera.co. If you want more on slide design, Nancy Duarte literally wrote the book on slides, and it's a fantastic book. And that's it. I made it. I can put that URL into the chat box here. I'll go ahead and stop recording now. Thank you both for attending.